Hello there, my friends, and welcome to Cinephile Recapped. Today we'll be recapping a movie that may very well have laid the foundation for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's a superhero horror movie from 1998, Blade. Spoilers incoming. Let's begin. The premise of this movie revolves around Blade, a human-vampire hybrid known as the Daywalker, who inherited all the strength of a vampire and only one of their weaknesses, the thirst for blood. Driven by the hate for vampires, he wages a secret war against the bloodsuckers who lurk within the shadows among the oblivious humans. When the stakes are raised by Deacon Frost, a vampire determined on summoning La Magra, the vampire god, so the vampires can rule the world, it's up to Blade and his companions to save the night. And it's up to you to save yourselves a whole lot of time. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and hit that notification bell so that way you're notified whenever we drop another Cinephile recap on you. And then after the recap's all said and done, you can talk about whether the movie is cap or if it slaps. But right now, let's begin with Blade. The movie begins as a bloody woman is rushed into the hospital where she gives birth to a boy. 30 years later, in the next scene, a young woman takes a young man to a hidden underground rave. However, as the wild night carries on, the young man notices blood falling from the ceiling. Seconds later, much to the young man's horror, the sprinkler system above them starts spraying blood. Even worse, he realizes that the club is full of vampires who attack him. As he tries to crawl away from them, he finds himself at Blade's feet. After some apprehension, the vampires begin to attack Blade, but he cleans house, killing all the vampires in sight. The fight culminates with Blade pinning Quinn, a vampire underboss, onto the walls with 2 stakes and setting him on fire. However, Blade is forced to escape when the police arrive. Later that night, Quinn's charred body is taken to a hospital morgue, where Dr. Curtis Weber convinces the reluctant Dr. Karen Jensen, a hematologist, and his ex, to examine Quinn's corpse. However, as they examine the body, Quinn comes back to life and sucks Webb dry before turning on Karen, who he also bites. However, before Quinn can kill Karen, Blade saves her by beating Quinn up and chopping off Quinn's arm. At that moment, before Blade can kill Quinn, the police interrupt, which gives Quinn the opportunity to escape. After losing Quinn, Blade decides not to leave Karen to die, so he escapes from the police with Karen. The next day, Blade and an unconscious Karen arrive at Blade's hideout, where Whistler, Blade's mentor, is forging weapons. When Blade presents Karen to him, Whistler warns Blade that Karen is likely to turn, but they inject her with a garlic suppressant in the hope that it would save her from becoming a vampire. Cut to the next scene, where the disgruntled council of pureblood vampire elders, who have learned about the slaughter at the rave, summon Frost, the leader of the New Age vampires, and condemn him for disrupting the existing truce between humans by drawing attention to their kind with his raves. They tell him to be more discreet, but Frost, who is tired of hiding from the humans and wants to rule over them, insists on changing the system. Gaetano Dragonetti, one of the elders, insists that Frost cannot force them to change their ways because Frost is merely a turned vampire, so they dismiss him. Before he leaves, Frost threatens that one day the council may find themselves extinct. In the next scene, Blade arrives at an apothecary to buy some suppressive serum. When the apothecary owner notices that he's a week early, Blade admits it's because he's building resistance to the serum. The store owner wishes Blade luck before he leaves. Meanwhile, back at Blade's hideout, Karen wakes up and notices Blade's rigged sword. She then overhears Whistler as he reveals to Blade that he learned Karen is a hematologist and she may be helpful to them. Following this, Karen watches as Whistler injects Blade with a suppressive serum. Although Whistler warns that this dose is dangerously more than his usual dose, Blade tells him to get on with it. When they're done, Blade and Whistler notice Karen watching, so Whistler chases her before she runs away. When Whistler catches Karen, he tells her about vampires and his and Blade's crusade to wipe them off the planet. Nonetheless, Whistler gives Blade an experimental UV light before he heads out. Blade advises her to get out of town quickly before the vampires get to her, while Whistler warns her not to go to the police and to be wary of vampires because they're everywhere. When Karen complains about being patched up and dumped, he gives her some garlic mace to protect herself, before advising her to kill herself if she notices herself turning into a vampire. Meanwhile, Gaetano finds Frost and scolds him for being in a restricted library. When he realizes that Frost is trying to translate an ancient manuscript, he tells Frost it's useless because the language is lost. Realizing Frost is ignoring him, Gaetano raises his voice and strikes Frost before demanding to know what Frost is up to. When Frost doesn't back down, Gaetano leaves, citing that he's bored with Frost, who returns to the manuscripts. Cut to the next scene, where Blade drops Karen off at her home. After warning her to be wary of vampires, he leaves her there paranoid. Karen enters an elevator in her building and becomes even more paranoid when she notices 2 strange people with weird tattoos on their neck in the elevator with her. Once Karen gets to her floor, she heads to her apartment, although Karen believes that they're following her. It turns out they aren't. However, as Karen packs some things in her apartment, she is startled when a cop named Krieger shows up under the pretense of checking up on her after she was kidnapped at the hospital last night. However, Krieger turns on Kate, who tries to defend herself, but the garlic mace doesn't work. Luckily, Blade saves her from Krieger. Blade identifies Krieger as a familiar, a vampire lackey belonging to Frost. Blade and Karen search Krieger's car and find blood from the Hilburn clinic. Blade tries to find out where Krieger is delivering the package, but Karen interrupts the violent interrogation, which gives Krieger a chance to escape. Blade tells Karen to wake up if she wants to survive this world. As Blade leaves, Karen decides to follow him, because it's the only way that she can stay alive long enough to find a cure. Some hours later, Blade and Karen wait for Krieger to return to his car, although Karen doubts that Krieger will return. However, he does show up, so they follow him to a club with a vampire safe house hidden within it. After Blade arms himself, he and Karen then force their way into the club and force Krieger into revealing the entrance into a hidden compartment behind the fridge. After chasing Krieger off, Blade and Karen go down into the underground archive. In the meanwhile, as Frost continues to decode the manuscripts, Krieger bursts in on a party at Frost's where he tells Frost that he accidentally let Blade into the archives. As he tries to apologize, however, Frost and his vampire cohorts gorge on Krieger and suck him dry. Following this, Frost orders Quinn to apprehend Blade alive. Back at the archive, Blade and Karen find Pearl, the morbidly obese custodian of the archive. Although Pearl begs Frost for help, Frost leaves Pearl to Blade's mercy. Blade and Karen use the UV lights to torture Pearl, who reveals the prophecy of the return of Lamagra, the blood god. After Blade extracts the hard drive containing the prophecy, he blows up a storage unit, while Karen kills Pearl with a UV light. In the storage unit, they discover parchments containing vampire history. However, as they analyze the parchments, they are ambushed and captured by Quinn and his men. But as Quinn tortures Blade, Whistler, who's been maintaining radio contact, appears and saves the day. Whistler bombs the archive, while he, Blade, and Karen escape through an underground railway. Although Blade and Karen lose Whistler, Blade manages to chop Quinn's arm off again, before grabbing onto a train and escaping with Karen. As Karen helps with his dislocated arm, Blade injects himself with more serum. Later that night, Whistler reveals to Karen that Blade is a hybrid vampire whose mother died giving birth to him when she was bitten by a vampire while she was pregnant. Despite having most of their strengths and none of their weaknesses, he still thirsts for blood. Whistler also reveals that the reason he hunts vampires himself is because a vampire killed his family and forced him to pick which one of them will die first. However, they're running out of time because of Frost and his vampires. Whistler also feels that Frost is planning something big. Later that night, Karen tries to convince Blade that he's human and that he should forget about being a vampire. But Blade, who has spent his whole life looking for the person who did this to him, says he cannot forget. Meanwhile, argue about losing Blade, Frost calms Quinn down after insisting he needs Quinn so that they can take Blade alive. Later on, Frost and his gang abduct Gitano and defang him before exposing him to the sun, which kills him. Afterwards, Frost takes control of the Council of Elders and asks for 12 volunteers. In the next scene, after Blade hands over evidence obtained from the archives containing information about the blood god, Karen shows them EDTA, an anticoagulant that becomes explosive when it comes into contact with vampire blood, and tells them that they can weaponize it. Following this, as Karen extracts Blade's blood, they overhear Whistler coughing, which causes Blade to reveal Whistler has cancer. Afterwards, when Blade leaves to get more serum, Whistler notices Karen's bite scars and reveals that she's already turned. Meanwhile, Blade finds Frost outside the apothecary, covered in sunscreen and holding a hostage. He tries to recruit Blade to his side, but Blade isn't fooled because he knows of the prophecy. All he wants is to kill Frost. Frost threatens to kill him, so Blade tries to shoot him. However, Frost dodges the bullets and throws the hostage in front of a bus, forcing Blade to save her while Frost escapes. Back at Blade's safe house, Karen injects an experimental cure that'll work for her, but may not work on Blade. However, she and Whistler are attacked by Frost and his vampires. They take Whistler out before abducting Karen. Later on, Blade arrives and finds Whistler grievously injured and bitten. Whistler reveals that he decoded the disc and learned that Frost is trying to trigger a vampire apocalypse by summoning Lamagra with a Daywalker's blood, Blade's blood. After warning Blade not to confront Frost because it could doom them all, Whistler takes Blade's gun and commits suicide. Following this, Blade watches a tape Frost left behind and discovers Frost is holed up at the Westwood Towers. Following this, Blade arms up for battle. Meanwhile, at the Westwood Towers, Frost offers to turn Karen, but Karen says it's pointless because she has a cure. She then makes jest of Frost for being just another turned vampire, which provokes Frost, who declares that it won't matter once the blood god is summoned and they are all faced with the chaos the god will cause. Moments later, Blade arrives and unleashes havoc, even killing the human employees. As Blade works his way up to the tower, he kills 2 vampire ninjas with Karen's EDTA. However, as he heads on, he enters Frost's room where he finds his mother, Vanessa. Distracted by her presence, Blade is taken down by Frost. Turns out Vanessa belongs to Frost and that Frost is a vampire who bit his mother. In the next scene, Blade and Karen are transported to the Temple of Eternal Night. Blade, who needs his serum, learns that if he takes Karen's cure, he will lose his abilities forever. When they arrive at the temple, they find Frost with the Council of Elders. Frost disarms Blade's rigged sword before taunting Blade for thirsting for blood and needing his serum, not realizing it's the EDTA in his possession. After throwing the EDTA across the room, Frost also taunts Blade for not fulfilling his potential as a hybrid. However, Blade doesn't care about all of this and declares Frost will be dead by dawn. After they take Blade to prepare for the ritual, Frost and Quinn throw Karen into a pit where Webb, now a rotting zombie creature, attacks her. However, Karen beats Webb up before escaping the pit. Meanwhile, Blade is placed into a chamber in preparation for the ritual. Vanessa then tells Blade that she's enjoyed being a vampire and that the thirst always wins before locking him in the chamber. As the chamber extracts Blade's blood, Frost's vampires force the Guardians into their positions as the ritual commences, not realizing that Karen has escaped from the pit. As Karen releases Blade from the chamber, Frost and Quinn descend to their positions for the ritual. Quinn, who is excited about the prospect of becoming a god, doesn't realize there will only be one god. At the same time, Karen forces Blade, who has been drained of all his blood, to drink hers. While Blade's blood falls on the Elders and Frost, Blade drinks from Karen and regains his strength. However, it's too late as the ritual has begun. Vanessa finds Blade is back. Blade kills her, just as the ritual comes to an end, and Frost gains the powers of La Magra. Following all this, Blade heads straight to the vampires and kills Quinn immediately, before going in hard on them. After killing all the vampires, Blade gets into a sword fight with Frost. Although he wins a sword fight, even amputating and disemboweling Frost in the process, Frost's newfound power grants superior healing ability which overwhelms Blade. However, Blade manages to use his rigged sword to get the EDTA, which he empties into Frost, pumped with a large volume of the anticoagulant. Frost explodes and is defeated. In the aftermath, Blade and Karen leave the temple. Karen offers to cure Blade, but Blade declines this offer because the war on vampires must go on and he'll need his powers. He asks her to develop a better serum for him instead. In the final scene, a man and a woman walk through the streets of Moscow. However, it turns out the man is a vampire. Before he can feed on the woman, Blade attacks, signifying that the war against vampires wages on. And there you have it, the legendary movie Blade, starring Wesley Snipes. Whoever thought that martial arts and vampires could be blended so beautifully together? Well, whoever you are a genius. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed the recap, and if you did, please hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell icon to be notified when we drop another recap on you. And with that, thanks for watching.